Number 10. Fazbear has the blueprints. When it comes to many of the animatronics that we've encountered in this franchise, it seems to have been implied that either William Afton or his partner Henry Emily in some capacity, or some combination thereof, were the ones responsible for creating said robotic beings. Now that both Henry and William are seemingly gone, however, it is interesting to see Fazbear apparently thriving with both their own meta game that appears to exist within the universe, with Help Wanted, and also with their new establishment, the Freddy Fazbear Mega Pizzaplex. Considering we also have seen new animatronics here, it must mean that Fazbear Entertainment is now the one behind making these animatronics, and it seems to be implied that as such they have secured the blueprints for the original animatronics and were able to use them to create new ones like Montgomery Gator and Roxanne Wolf. Either that or these are like old animatronics that they've updated, but I feel like it's implied that these are completely fresh, so they made them themselves. This means that William and Henry are really no longer needed with this company, although we don't know if either remains attached at all financially to Fazbear, or even attached to their founding story or their history. However, this also opens up the possibility of someone else at the head of Fazbear becoming corrupt and turning evil. Maybe there'll be a new William Afton one day. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more lists like it, I don't know what else we could pull from this game about William Afton, but I'm sure there's lots of things we still haven't even found yet. Be sure to let us know you want more lists on William Afton by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 9. I Always Come Back. While it seems like William Afton as Burntrap may finally be gone for good, he also might not be. After all, this is William freaking Afton we're talking about here, and the guy has pretty much become immortal, in my eyes at least. He has survived being spring-locked in a spring Bonnie suit, being locked up for years, burned to a crisp, possibly being possessed or haunted by one of his victims, perhaps having his consciousness uploaded into a game, and beyond. But just because it seems like the amalgamated Freddy blob finally took him out doesn't mean that is what happened. Burntrap could have somehow escaped his seemingly deadly fate and managed to get out of the Pizzaplex. Just where he would go next and what he would get up to, we don't really know. But we know it probably wouldn't be anything good, and he's probably up to something. He's probably out there right now. Number 8. Cult of Afton runs Fazbear Entertainment. Speaking of the possible ulterior motives of Fazbear Entertainment and their still possible connection to Afton and Emily, just why was the Mega Pizzaplex built on top of the ruins of another Freddy Fazbear location? While Vanny seems to be the only loyal follower of William Afton that we see in Security Breach, is it possible that there are corrupt forces working from within the Fazbear Entertainment Company, and that Vanny isn't the only one? That they are the ones who arranged it so that the Pizzaplex would be built in the first place on top of these ruins, and even placed Vanny/Vanessa there so that she could recover Afton's body in secret. I'm just saying, there are a lot of spooky coincidences that seem to have happened that seem, well, just too bizarre to actually be coincidences. Number 7. New voice actor. An interesting detail when it comes to the character's evolution in Security Breach is that it seems like Michael Curtis was going to be the voice of William Afton. From the trailers, that is what was implied. At least that's definitely what I was picking up on. And yet before, the main voice actor for William Afton, the one that we'd come to know from Sister Location at least, was PJ Haywood. The even stranger thing is if William Curtis was meant to play the role of William Afton, and the lines he uttered in the trailer, which hackers have claimed in the files are actually linked to Burntrap within the game, then why didn't he actually get to do those lines in the games? It seems like there must have been a directional shift when it came to the content that it was suggested we were going to get. It seems, based on the trailers, that Afton, Vanny, and possibly the security guard Vanessa were all going to play more important and prevalent roles in the game. It also kind of seems like we could have gotten one of two ways, with either like Vanessa helping us or Freddy helping us. Or maybe there is a version of the game where they both help us, I don't know. And yet we didn't see as much from any of these characters as we thought we would. Or at least we didn't see what we thought we would from them. So were the whole scenes that Curtis recorded lines for tossed, or was the direction changed much earlier on? Is Curtis's voice really even meant to be William Afton, or is this supposed to be some other character? I know this is more questions than answers, but this is another case where knowledge kind of just leads to more theories and speculations than any correct answers. Number 6. Maybe no longer British? The really interesting thing about having William Afton potentially recast in Security Breach is that it implies that he somehow may have lost his British accent, at least based on the voice that we heard. When PJ Haywood voiced William Afton in Sister Location, he was distinctly British. This was a character who definitely had a British accent. And yet if Michael Curtis is doing a voice for William Afton in the trailer, and those unused files were found under the header of Burn Trap in the games, he somehow, I guess, lost his British accent? So is he British or is he American? Or is he from somewhere else? It's possible that being burned severely might have also altered his vocal cords, or just that over time his accent diminished or changed, which can happen. I mean, after all, when we heard him in Sister Location, I think it was mainly in like flashback stuff, so I don't know, maybe it's been a long time and now all of a sudden his accent is gone. After all, dialects come from what we hear around us and are built over time through speech patterns based on those sounds. So if he had been in the US for, I guess, a long period of time, it is possible his voice could have changed. Then he could still be British, but you know, with an American accent, because his British accent sort of faded away. It should be noted though that the older that you are, the more unlikely it becomes that your voice would change like this. Which of course also begs the question, how old is William Afton anyways? Do we even know? Number 5. Rescued at the last moment. It's very unlikely that William Afton is actually dead. Although we talked about that being what seems to happen on the part 1 of this list, when it comes to Afton's fate and him being attacked by the Freddy amalgamated blob and pulled back deeper into the ruins as everything caved in around them, it's also just as likely that the blob was maybe saving Afton instead. After all, while the blob may be a monster, they also seemingly lashed out along with Burn Trap originally, and they are after all an amalgamation of his creations. They also tried to kill Gregory. You can die from the blob. Freddy is kind of like William's child as well, and it's possible that even while horribly disfigured, they still felt an allegiance to their creator. Perhaps at the last minute the blob is trying to save Afton. Although it looks like they are pulling Burn Trap further in towards this cave-in, they could also know of an escape route that was simply safer than the one Gregory and Glamrock Freddy seemed to be taking, and they could be attempting to pull Afton towards safety instead so that he could escape and live another day. Although, to be honest, I feel like he's lived enough days. However, this would possibly allow Afton to return in future games. Number 4. William Afton's final creation? Where did the blob come from? Well, we don't have a concrete answer at this point, as with so many things in the Fnaf lore, some fans have been pointing to the books for answers. On Reddit, one user known as Pickle Trip Jr. in the Five Nights at Freddy's subreddit responded to a post centered on the blob that was started up by user Spiritual Distance 168, where they brought up the fact that in Fourth Closet, the version that we see of William Afton there is actually experimenting with melting down the remaining animatronics and bonding them and the souls trapped within them together. He's doing this somewhere underground as well, which sounds, I don't know, pretty familiar to me based on Security Breach. If Fourth Closet is connected to this narrative, then it seems like it might be hinting that William may have actually had a hand in the creation of the blob. Either that or it's Pizzeria Simulator. I don't know. Number 3. Elizabeth Afton and William Afton team up. It's also very possible that Elizabeth Afton and William Afton have both managed to somehow live on and continue to survive. Heck, even Michael Afton could be, I don't know, mixed in there somewhere for all we know. While Elizabeth Afton was supposed to have been freed in spirit at the end of Pizzeria Simulator, the blob seems to be an amalgamation of many Freddys and all the other animatronics that were burned at the ending of that game. That would include Circus Baby as well. What if the blob struggled with whether or not to fight William, as within the tangled mess there were various consciousnesses with various allegiances, but in the end Circus Baby won out and decided to save him because she's still maybe part Elizabeth? The fact that the blob even seems to have some kind of will of its own seems to imply that the spirits within those animatronics somehow lingered and were not fully, at least, freed, which could mean we could see the return of Circus Baby teaming up with her dad in the future. Sounds terrifying. Or we could simply see a return of the blob fully amalgamated with Burn Trap as well. A very permanent, kind of terrifying team up. Number 2. 99.9% immortal. At this point, I think we can say that William Afton has achieved immortal status. I'm saying it. Let's get a stamp or something for this guy. Immortal. 99.9% immortal at least. The guy has come back from everything, and even when we thought he was finally gone, he still survived via some kind of, I don't know, ID chip in a suit? Afton ends up having his soul uploaded into the game Help Wanted and is somehow able to reunite said soul with his very dead at this point, crispy and falling apart body. How do you even use that body? At this point, I'm convinced that Afton has become a supernatural being, because as long as his soul or a remnant of it is still around, he just can't be destroyed. Also, how do you kill someone's soul? I don't know how to do that. That is probably the key to defeating him at this point, to be honest. But I don't know how you kill someone's soul. I don't think we've got to that point yet in these games. Number 1, more powerful than ever. The crazy thing when it comes to William Afton's appearance in Security Breach, the real crazy thing, another crazy thing I guess I should say at this point, and his move from Glitch Trap to Burn Trap is that even while in his Burn Trap form, he still seems to possess digital powers. What does this mean? Possibly that we have an even more powerful version of William Afton on our hands moving forward. Not only is he pretty much immortal and has proven to be virtually unkillable, but now he has both digital corruption powers and also possesses a physical form. I mean, it's a rough physical form, but it's still there. We also know that William Afton is likely some kind of charming figure who can easily influence others, as this has been implied in earlier canon within the games, and in the books. I mean, he must be charming in some capacity. He ended up with kids somehow, and he also ended up as one of the heads of a successful franchise, semi-successful franchise I guess, despite being a murderer, right? How did he do that? Also, a lot of people that are serial killers tend to be like weirdly charming, so if you ever meet someone that's a little too charming, I'm just saying, watch out.
In a 10, missing children's incident. I mean, this is a fairly low-hanging fruit since it's like the inciting moment for the whole series, but I think it's worth calling out at least number 8. The missing children's incident, in case you forgot, is the infamous incident where 5 kids go missing inside of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza and are never seen again. Police investigated but were never able to find the bodies, thus they had to let their suspect, in this case William Afton, go due to a lack of evidence. However, this is one of the most horrifically painful moments that you can think of, especially if you're a parent yourself. 5 families went into Freddy Fazbear's wanting their kids to have the time of their lives in 1985, but left without their favorite people. They had the time of their lives, alright, it just so happened to also be the end of their lives. And not only that, but Afton ends up getting away with it since the police were terrible at their jobs or were getting paid off. Still not sure which one is the case in this series, but the missing children's incident is one of the most messed up things to ever happen in this series, but without it we wouldn't have the series. At least it's all fake, right? Possibly killed wife. This hasn't been confirmed as of yet, so it's currently not canon. Many people still consider William Afton offing his wife to be the story of her demise, even though technically we know nothing about her, and she could still be alive for all we know. Many people consider her to have died in either a car crash or because William killed her, and those are like the most common thoughts on the matter. Although the her dying in a car accident thing came from like a Fnaf original music video that was probably using Minecraft characters, that is in no way canon to the series. Like, I've had people yell at me in my DMs telling me that it's canon that she died in a car accident, but no, it's not. It's not even canon that she died, really, but the potential is still there that William was the reason she kicked the animatronic parts filled bucket. Since it's only a possibility though, it's only number 9. If it gets confirmed, I'm more than willing to bump it up higher, because like statistically speaking, your spouse is the person most likely to kill you, so she should have been on her guard. And it ain't animatronics. We can joke all we want about how Afton has a hardcore bloodlust in this series, but his desire for human destruction has been there since the start. Thanks to the fast facts found in Fnaf AR's files, we learned that the Funtime robots, the ones used in Sister Location, were actually some of the first robots Afton ever made. Not exactly the first, but among the first. And that they were built with special containment chambers inside to store away items, which we all know is code for children's storage tanks, which we see the Funtimes actually have in their blueprints from Fnaf 6. So this means that Afton has been wanting to kill kids since before his kids had died. Hell, even maybe before his kids were born, depending on the timeline. Which at this point is as simple as my feelings for Vanessa, which is not simple at all. If anyone like cosplays Vanessa, feel free to hit me up on Instagram. And at 7, stored his daughter. While we know Afton isn't the best father, I think it's something else to end up locking your robot possessed by the soul of your dead daughter into an animatronic testing facility. That seems a bit too far if you ask for my humble opinion. But nevertheless, he still did it, and that's what Sister Location is all about. And William was even the one who sent us as Michael down there in the first place, and then we get shoved full of Ennard bits so that they can escape. Did William know about that plan? Unsure, because like in Fnaf 6, Baby says that she'll make her dad proud. So was that William's intention to like send us down there so Baby could get out? And if that was the case, why lock her down in there in the first place? I mean, like if she was your daughter, why not have her just like chill around the house, right? Like in the books, Baby is able to transform between Baby and like a human looking animatronic at will. So why not add this to that version, and then you can have your daughter back, albeit a little more messed up. But like more like you in the long run, right? I don't know. This family is messed the hell up, and nothing makes sense. And at 6, lied about Remnant. Now, this isn't confirmed, much like the fact that he possibly killed his wife. However, this seems like the most likely explanation to me. So if you want a full explanation as to why I think Afton was the one who lied about Remnant, go check out that video linked up in the iCard. But I'm going to wrap this up quickly here. Basically, there have been 3 fires so far that were meant to finish off William Afton, and none of them have worked. The reason Henry tried fire was because that's supposed to be the thing that can burn off Remnant. However, Remnant can also be found in liquid form, so how can it be molten but also be burnt by fire? It makes more sense that William made up the lie that he could be killed by fire, so Henry would keep trying and failing to kill him, so he wouldn't have to worry about actually dying, since literally every time he's been caught in a fire, he has survived. And the other animatronics infused with Remnant also survived, like Baby, the puppet, and entered in Fnaf 6, as we see from the Blob in Security Breach. Halfway through into number 5, Vanessa. Possessing Vanessa was certainly one of the more messed up things that William did. It just sounds weird, you know? Like this guy pops up into your VR headset, then takes over your body without your consent, so now you end up killing for him. That's kind of messed up. Actually, no, not kind of, that's incredibly messed up. I mean, she knows what's going on too. She actively talks in hushed tones about how she can't talk about it to her therapist. So like, what the hell is the dynamic here? I mean, possessing someone is already pretty messed up, but then causing them to make a rabbit costume so you're still a furry is a whole other set of kinks that I don't even want to talk about. And then, she knows that there's an evil inside her, but she can't do anything about it. She fears for her life, which only makes me wonder what William has been saying to her, and she's now, with full knowledge of her darker half, willing to lock a kid in a lost and found room until the police arrive, despite never calling the police, and then lets that darker half track him down. And at 4, later that night. The Midnight Motorist minigame seems simple enough, but the true horror of this minigame comes from the implications of it. Since in the game files, the minigame is known as Later That Night. Most people akin the game to what happened after William kills Charlotte outside Fredbear's Family Diner in Fnaf 2's Take Cake minigame. But if this is true, this is probably one of the scariest moments in all of Fnaf history. This man just killed someone, but then goes home to his kids, reprimands his son and abuses him by locking him in his room so much that he had to break his window to escape. Plus, think of all the people driving past him, unaware of the violent crime that he had just committed. It's scary because this is the case in the real world too. Technically speaking, anyone we encounter can be a serial killer. And that is a horrific thought, since also you're only alive because everyone you've ever encountered has chosen not to kill you, which only makes the whole anyone could be a serial killer thing even worse. And in this case, this man literally just killed someone and then comes home and is going to yell at his son who's been in his room all day. Like, god damn, bro, how much residual anger do you have suppressed inside your body? Getting close to the end, in at number 3, Stuffed. One of the most deranged things that William Afton did was stuff the bodies of the original 5 missing children into the original 5 animatronics: Bonnie, Foxy, Freddy, Chica, and Golden Freddy. And the craziest part is that he didn't get caught for it. Yeah, he didn't. The animatronics smelt like death, started leaking blood and other fluids, and the police didn't bat an eye. He put these bodies in animatronics that perform for other kids and their parents every single day. How does anyone think that that's a good idea? Unless it was his way of displaying his kills or something, like some of the crime shows like to mention. How some killers enjoy the world knowing what they did, since it helps them feel more powerful or something. Fuels their ego. Like maybe even if they didn't know that the bodies were there, William could be using that as an ego boost, which is messed up. And also ruins the whole he did it because his kids were dying theory, aside from the whole him killing before his kids died thing. Also, how did the police not confiscate the animatronics for evidence? Penultimately, in at number 2, First Victim. They say a killer's first victim is the most important, since it usually indicates what got them to start killing or other psychological clues that they could use to predict his next moves. But in the case of William Afton, his first victim was the daughter of his longtime business partner Henry, which is hella messed up because she was 3 at the time, that time being 1983. And this is the year that Afton's life started going downhill in the worst ways possible. He starts killing off kids, and then sticks with that MO throughout the rest of his criminal career. But the fact that his first victim was someone who trusted him, who didn't exactly suspect him even though her father did, is something even I fear. I'm not a parent, so I can only imagine how this must have felt. And if that was me, I'd be doing a lot more than burning down restaurants in an attempt to put that down. I'd be doing it myself, especially if he had killed my daughter when she was only 3 years old. Like, I can feel the rage brewing, and I don't even have someone that I could, in theory, make a daughter with. And finally, in at number 1, killed his kids. The worst thing that Afton has done by far is gotten his own kids killed. Sure, he may not have done it directly, but his actions ended up resulting in all 3 of his kids' demises. Him killing Charlotte got Fredbear's closed. which resulted in him having to open up circus babies, which made him have to dust off Baby and the other fun times, which were designed to kill in the first place. Baby ends up grabbing and crushing Elizabeth, resulting in her possessing the animatronic. He superpowered the jaw of the Fredbear animatronic used in the new Freddy Fazbear's, which ends up crushing his youngest son's skull, since that was not a springlock failure due to all the springlocks being active, since it was in animatronic mode, not suit mode, so there was nothing to fail, meaning that he had to have been crushed by the power of his jaw. And while you could argue that it was Michael's fault, why would he think that Fredbear's mouth was overpowered? As the suit technician, William knew what was going on and intentionally souped up the jaw power. And then he gets Michael killed when he sends him down to find his sister in sister location, which ends up getting him stuffed with innards and then letting himself burn in Pizzeria Simulator. So yeah, William's actions got all 3 of his kids killed just because he had to kill his business partner's daughter. In at 10, Vanessa. Possessing Vanessa itself was certainly one of the more messed up things that William did. Okay, I mean, it kind of sounds weird, you know, and also extremely unrealistic. Like, this guy just pops up in your VR headset, then takes over your body after you collected 16 digital VHS tapes, or cassette tapes, I guess technically. But then after he takes over your body, you end up killing for him. Okay, that's messed up. And like, not even kind of, that's incredibly messed up. But also, like, how? I mean, like, she knows what's going on too. She actively talks in hushed tones about how she can't talk to her therapist about it. But like, Afton got lucky with specifically was that Vanessa has no willpower to actually sacrifice for the greater good, okay? I mean, like, at this point, I feel like it's fairly safe to infer that Jeremy from Fnaf AR didn't go crazy because he just saw Glitch Trap. I think it's fairly reasonable to say that he got possessed. At this point, Tape Girl hadn't broken up Glitch Trap into the tapes yet, and he was probably just able to possess whoever he wanted. So if Jeremy did get possessed, and the possession worked in a similar way to that it did to Vanessa, Jeremy would at times be sentient and in control of his own body. So if he knew about Glitch Trap, maybe he didn't cut his face off because he was freaking out. Maybe he did it to try to kill the monster that was inside him. In at 9, Princess Quest. The whole Princess Quest thing, its purpose was to lock Vanny away and prevent her from regaining control of her own body. So why did William create, or allow for the creation of a fail-safe that allows her to escape? I mean, like, sure, they didn't expect a random kid to come along, figure it out, maybe, but given the track record of Afton and his plans, you'd think that he would have smartened up after at least 50 years. I don't understand. That's like having a self-destruct button on the bomb that you wanted to make sure nobody could stop. Or if Superman had like a kill me button, or just like had like a free kryptonite vending machine that he just put out in the middle of Metropolis. It's stupid. Like, if you want something to work, why give it a possible way to fail? One of the dumbest things that William has ever done. But he's also so goddamn lucky that it didn't backfire canonically. Seriously, what's the point behind having a way to undo your evil plans? This could just as reasonably actually been the canon ending to the game, even though we play as a kid the size of a 4-year-old. And the fact that it wasn't the canon ending, it's pure luck the way that that didn't happen, okay? Just like bury the third machine if you insist on doing this. And at 8, Springlock suits. The Springlock suits in general are also something that William and even Henry both got extremely lucky with. Like, while Henry may not have like designed the Springlock suits, he certainly let Afton create them and then allowed for their use in the restaurants despite them being incredibly dangerous to employees, only putting them out of commission when someone eventually got hurt and not actually being proactive because, you know, they are literal death machines. You make separate animatronics and then you have separate costumes, okay? That's the right move, that's the smart move, that's the safe move. But these so-called businessmen thought, yeah, I'll put the safety of my employees at risk by making them wear a hot as balls suit filled with robot parts that even with the slightest bit of moisture will shoot those robotic parts right back to where your bones are. What can possibly go wrong? Like, you think that Willy Wonka has OSHA violations? Imagine FNAF's OSHA violations. Oh wait, actually, you don't have to, because we already did a whole list on that. Be sure you go check it out. But seriously, the fact that nobody sued them because they were being put in these things instead of, like, you know, much safer and cheaper options of, you know, a fabric suit is insane. And at 7, calling the cops. Let's look at this logically, alright? Henry knew what was going on with Afton, and then Afton had some shady scenarios cooking in his brain. So if he knew that this man was up to no good, and he was fearing for his daughter's safety, why didn't he make the call to the police and be like, hey man, so this William Afton guy is like thinking about killing kids, and probably is the one that's been killing the kids that you're looking for. Like, I mean, sure, maybe you didn't have proof, but you could have certainly tipped them off, and then they could have, you know, found the proof. Come on, they could at least keep a closer eye on him, but you didn't. And instead, you did a whole load of other that in reality didn't do anything to stop William. I mean, you did one thing that put him out of commission for like 30 years, but again, that was only 30 years. You could have stopped him. You could have actually stopped him in his tracks, but instead you chose to keep your mouth shut. That is Afton's plot armor working overtime with no extra pay. And at 6, Leave It to Fate. Fnaf 6 was supposed to be the end of the Afton story. I was so looking forward to it. That's what Henry sets out to do in this game. Make sure that nobody remembered what happened there. However, this also figured that the first fire didn't work, so a second one surely will. And in fact, he was so confident in this plan for whatever goddamn reason that he actually let himself die in the process to leave nobody remembering what happened. But he didn't think that even if himself, William, and all their kids are dead, the parents of the victims still know. And as we learned from Security Breach in the duffel bags, there are other parents who remember it too. Like, it's a whole thing in the FNAF universe. They cite the missing children from the Pizzaplexes happening again. If Henry had stuck around to see if the job was really done, maybe William wouldn't have been able to possess Vanny and come back yet again and just kill more people. Henry should have lit the place up, smashed everything that survived, and then maybe you could have offed yourself. But at least make sure the job is done first. Halfway through into number 5, worst Easter ever. Okay, from an in-universe perspective, in Security Breach, Vanny brought back seemingly this Earth's most prolific killer. But from a story perspective, it also kinda comes out of nowhere and feels forced. And in a game sense, he also just looks terrifying and then sends all the broken animatronics after us. And lore-wise, Afton's back again. However, he's also not entirely back this time, considering how this version actually seems to finally be dead, however only functional because maybe the coded version of Afton's consciousness is inside the animatronic. No matter what, this shouldn't have worked. He shouldn't have been able to have a sentient code form possessed Vanny, but then also be able to be present in his actual body. Like what? Unless this entire time after getting spring locked, his consciousness was instantly turned into a code, and that was then controlling the Springtrap suit. And in a way, I guess, would make sense. I mean, it would make a lot more sense than him being possessed by the spirit of his son. But from everything we've gotten, including Ultimate Custom Night and the man in room 1280, he was possessed, but to be kept alive so he could keep suffering. Okay? Meaning that none of this should have worked. But it did, and it forsprung. So this absolute animatronic genius, the technician that made these suits, that handles the maintenance and has explained to every employee that has put on one of these things on like the proper procedure for the spring lock suits and making sure that it doesn't, you know, snap and then kill you, including the spring bodysuit that he uses to kill, ends up climbing inside the suit in a panic in an attempt to make himself feel more powerful. But somehow he's so smart that he didn't notice the leaking goddamn ceiling, which is already a health hazard, which you should have noticed beforehand. But then this also causes the spring locks that were active to snap shut, which would have killed him. However, this lucky mother hubber somehow managed to get possessed by someone who was so pissed at him that they kept him alive through all of his supposed to be deaths because they wanted William to suffer. Did they not realize how counterintuitive that is? The man literally wants to live forever, and you are enabling him to do so. Old Man Consequences is right. Leave the demon to his demons. Rest your own soul so that Afton could finally die and then actually suffer in hell for all of eternity, instead of a goddamn dream version that you made up when he was recharging underneath the Pizzaplex, or before he showed up in FNAF 6, or whenever you were goddamn torturing him with all this fake hell you made up. God damn it! Getting close to the end in number 3, first victim. They say that a killer's first victim is the most important, since it might indicate what really got them to start killing, or other psychological clues that they can use to predict his next moves. But in the case of William Afton, his first victim was the daughter of his longtime business partner Henry, which is hella messed up because she was 3 at the time. And while we may have talked about how Henry dropped the ball before, this was the year that Afton's life started going downhill in the worst of ways. Cause like he started killing off kids, and then he sticks with that MO throughout the rest of the criminal career. Then like he also loses his kids after that. But the fact that his first victim was someone who trusted him, who didn't really suspect him of anything, even though her father did, is something that I fear. But ultimately, into number 2, baby. This guy is actually the luckiest mother alive. This girl was killed by a robot her father made that was specifically designed to kill. She was then locked away in an underground storage unit where she was regularly shocked and tortured by scientists, technicians that William probably hired so that they could try and find out the answers to why she's possessed. She goes through all of this, is locked underground for like 45 years at least, and then goes on to try to make her father proud in FNAF 6. She literally says, quote, "I will make proud, daddy," while her father is literally in the building with her. Girl, This man is the reason you are dead. Literally, there is no debate about it here. This is 100% William's fault. And the fact that he didn't put a blacklist of people not to kill only makes this more on him. But you still want to make him proud? And finally, and at number 1, the Palladium rule. I will stand by this until the day I die. And you know what? I used to call it the Platinum rule, but now it's the Palladium rule because it's a meme and I love it. The most ridiculous but luckiest thing that has ever happened in Fnaf was the fact that William Afton killed people in his own place of business and then didn't get caught. I don't know if this was always his intention, but like, who the absolute living hell would think that this is a good idea? Seriously, even if it's a TV show, okay, How I Met Your Mother does have some good lessons. One of those is Barney's Platinum rule, which is if you have to see the person every day because you work with them or they live in an apartment next door to you, okay, don't engage in some form of relationship, okay? Because come a breakup, which is statistically probable, it just results in awkwardness and pain. And while this isn't the exact same thing, you are at this building all the time. Your name is a part of the company, so why would you think that this is a good idea? Literally go anywhere else, okay? You ended up even getting banned while there was an investigation underway. I don't get it.
Number 10, Elizabeth's fate. Elizabeth probably is one of the saddest stories of all of the Afton family members. When she was young, all she wanted to do was play with Circus Baby, the animatronic that her father had supposedly made for her. Unfortunately, this didn't end up working out. Well, it kind of did work out, but not in a good way. William told her both that he'd made the animatronic for her, but also that she should be cautious around it and that she would need to keep her distance. Kind of some contradicting stuff there, Mr. Afton. In the end, Elizabeth snuck off to play with Circus Baby, being lured away from the group by ice cream. She then ended up being devoured by the animatronic. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more lists on the Afton family and all of the mysteries within the Afton family, because there are many, please be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. I love diving into all the mysteries and all the horrors. Number 9, Crying Child's Fate. Possibly Evan's fate would be an appropriate title of this as well, assuming that Evan is actually the true name for CC. Crying Child meets a terrifying end. This poor victim, and likely also offspring of William Afton's, ends up having his birthday at Fredbear's and is seemingly tormented by his older brother during it. Though really, why Crying Child is such a fan of Fredbear's when the animatronics terrify him, I don't really get that. But I guess that's also a lot of the Fnaf fanbase, who like to be scared, so maybe CC is scared too but is also a fan? I don't know. Either way, Crying Child's brother decides the best way to tease him is to take him up to the stage and lift him up to give Fredbear a big kiss. His brother and his friends stick CC's head in the animatronic, but something goes awfully wrong, and the animatronic bear chomps down on CC's head, crushing it. While CC does survive the accident, he never fully recovers and shortly after dies as a result of his injuries. Number 8, Circus Baby. After her death at the hands of Circus Baby, Elizabeth would actually become one with the animatronic, with her soul possessing it and going on to live within that animatronic. Elizabeth's soul would then become trapped within Circus Baby. In Sister Location, it seemed as though the knowledge of his sister's fate was what inspired Michael Afton to get a job at the underground facility, in hopes of freeing her. It's unclear whether Michael was doing this of his own volition, or whether he was compelled to do so by his father William. Number 7, Michael failed. In the end, Michael failed his mission though to free his sister's spirit. There is an ending where he escapes the facility and his true fate, but we'd also learn that the real ending involved him being harmed simply because he came to try and free his sister. Oh no, just I guess kind of like a wrong place, wrong time scenario. In the ending where you as Michael do survive and get away, it's implied that Circus Baby knows the reason why Michael has come, and actually attempts to bait him from leaving his safe room in order to confront her and attempt to fulfill his mission to save his sister. Either way that you finish the game though, the fact remains that Michael failed to save Elizabeth, who still is trapped within Baby, or I guess what's left of her, by the end of the game. Number 6, Michael's fate. Michael doesn't just fail at being unable to save his sister, but he also potentially loses his own life in the process. Unless of course he was an animatronic the whole time, which could be very well possible at this point. The true ending of Sister Location finished with Michael getting scooped by Ennard and having his insides replaced by the amalgamation of Sister Location animatronics, who now occupy that endoskeleton, Ennard. This is how they are able to escape the facility, through Michael. Although Michael seemingly still somehow survives this, not really dying on the inside despite being without presumably most, if not all, of his internal organs. He continues walking around as normal until his flesh has rotted, and and then he vomits up the parts of the endoskeleton within him, collapsing to the ground, as we can assume there would be really nothing left inside of him to hold him up. Probably didn't even have bones left after that big scoop after all. However, he is somehow revived by Circus Baby's voice, reassuring him that he won't die. You won't die, you won't die. Now, presumably undead, Michael continues on in his life forever changed. Number 5. William's profession. One of the creepiest things about William Afton, just to begin with, is his involvement in these family restaurants featuring live bands made up of animatronics. Live bands. The fact that he even made animatronics, never mind all the weird mad science that goes with that, is disturbing on its own. I mean, these animatronics all look pretty creepy, and I know all the Freddy chains are meant to be like a place of joy and happiness, at least on paper, but these animatronics do not scream joy and happiness to me. They scream terror, they scream at me to like run for the exit. Everything except joy and happiness really is what they're screaming at me. Also, just sometimes they're just screaming at me because they're jump scaring me. Number 4. William's hobby. One of the scariest truths involving the Afton family is William's role as a killer. I PG-13'd it up and referred to it as his hobby in the title of this point because, well, censorship and such, but it seems as though this hobby is quickly becoming more like his true profession. William has killed multiple people at this point for, well, for a reason we don't really quite fully understand yet. Though I'm sure he has his reasons, right? I mean, he's gotta have reasons, right? Included in the deaths he's had a hand in, albeit likely not directly, are the deaths of his own offspring. All 3 of his kids, if there are 3, I'm pretty sure there's still 3 either way you slice it. Even if Michael is Evan, there's still gotta be an older sibling, and then there's still Elizabeth, so all 3 of his kids seem to have been taken out by animatronics. Although Michael was also weirdly still alive even after his death following sister location, making us wonder just how human he and perhaps his siblings may really be. Maybe they were never human children. Maybe they were all robots. Number 3. Springtrap. Another very dark truth is that William Afton went on to become the monster known as Springtrap. Springtrap is the main antagonist of Fnaf 3, where you are a security guard at a sort of haunted house / museum, created to profit off of the terrible and tragic events that seem to destroy Freddy Fazbear's Pizza and seemingly the reputation of Fazbear Entertainment's reputation besides. William Afton was chased by the spirits of his victims who had come to possess the animatronic suits. He chose to hide in a spring-lock Bonnie suit, but water coming into contact with it caused the spring locks to loosen, malfunction, and they tore through William's organs and body, presumably, trapping him within the suit and in theory killing him. Though of course he seems pretty lively in FNAF 3 as the only true and physical antagonist. And I believe that's after 30 years of him being like sort of locked away, so I guess he's like a spirit possessing the animatronic, or he's still alive. I have a lot of questions. Number 2. Stitch Wraith. When you really think about it, William was even involved in the creation of Stitch Wraith, which is pretty astounding and also horrifying. According to the Fazbear Frights book, William was the one responsible for Andrew's death, and Andrew is one of the souls who would go on to possess or become the Stitch Wraith. Initially, Andrew tied himself to William, preventing him from dying in an attempt to torment him. You'd think making your killer immortal would kinda be a bad idea, but I guess Andrew's whole thing was more selfish, not really caring about preventing any further killings or deaths, more wanting to make sure that William lived on so that William could suffer ever more. We learn of Andrew's story in The Man in the Room 1280 from the 5th Fazbear Frights book, Bunny Call. Number 1. Immortal William. Despite the fact that William has seemingly died multiple times, it appears that he must somehow be immortal. Whether that's thanks to Andrew, even after Andrew left him, or is something that William did to himself, or is perhaps just a coincidence. Every time William seemingly dies in the FNAF series, he comes back. He's as resilient as Michael Myers at this point. He just dies and he keeps coming back no matter what. He's been spring-locked, burned alive in a building twice, the second time around seemingly locked up and unable to escape, and yet now he is back as Glitchtrap. This time he has returned through someone scanning a barcode from a Spring Bonnie suit that I suppose he still somehow possessed in some capacity, as it downloaded his spirit, his soul, or his essence into the game, allowing William to live once more. I'm telling you, if you ever think William has finally died, do not believe it, because he hasn't.
William Afton, or as he was then known, the Purple Guy's first appearance was in Five Nights at Freddy's 2, which takes place in 1987. However, he only appeared in the minigames, which dated back all the way to 1983, the start of his killing spree. However, his story goes further back than that, to when he lost his wife under mysterious and unknown circumstances. William Afton is a father as well, to 3 children. Elizabeth, Michael, and another, however we haven't been able to definitively identify his name. Working theories involve Evan, Chris, and Michael, although currently we refer to him as CC or Crying Child due to his appearance in Fnaf 4 being constantly crying. But this is where our story truly begins, Five Nights at Freddy's 4, which takes place in 1983, the same year William starts his killing spree. At the time, we still knew him as the Purple Guy, and before this game, at some point either earlier or in a year prior to 83, William loses his daughter Elizabeth to the Circus Baby animatronic, which he had designed in order to capture kids. We interrogated him, however, he avoided all questions, and without a body, we had no reason to hold him. A quick transcript from that interrogation, quote, "Officer, there's no doubting what you've achieved on a technical level. These are clearly state of the art. There are just certain design choices that were made for these robots that we don't fully understand. We were hoping that you could shed some light on those. She can dance. She can sing. She's equipped with a built-in helium tank for inflating balloons right at her fingertips. She can take song requests. She can even dispense ice cream. With all due respect, those aren't the design choices we were curious about, Mr. Afton." After losing his daughter, William seemed determined to not lose another kid, making a series of plushie cameras, which could have just been the one camera that Crying Child took everywhere, of Fredbear plushies. He planted these sorts of cameras in 3 locations around the house, as well as various other places in the vicinity of his home and his workplace, in an effort to keep his other son away from the place that ended up taking his daughter. However, this effort proved futile, since in 1983 at some point between April and October of 1983, given that the cutscenes we see have no snow on the ground, and given that Crying Child is wearing a t-shirt and shorts, it must be spring or summer, so more realistically at some point between April and August of 1983, Crying Child was shoved into the Fredbear animatronic mouth by his older brother, resulting in his head getting crunched by the animatronic, which shouldn't have been able to happen, but that idea was never investigated for some reason or another. However, looking at the mean temperature in Hurricane, Utah, which is where Five Nights at Freddy's takes place, over the months of 1983 according to Almanac.com, we can assume that this took place closer to summer of 1983, just thanks to the weather getting above 70 Fahrenheit or 21 Celsius for the rest of the world around the middle of June. This places the Charlotte killing after the death of Crying Child, since according to The Fourth Closet, the final Five Nights at Freddy's novel, Sammy Emily went missing on November 1st, 1983, which is later revealed to actually be Charlotte's original body. So, if Charlie dies in November, we can reasonably assume that Crying Child, and therefore Elizabeth, dies beforehand. Why discuss all this in so much detail? Well, it can help explain a motive. Afton could have been driven to killing by losing his children in and prior to 1983. However, this seems to also be entirely disproven based on how his kids died, since both of his kids died as a direct result of Afton's desire to kill. Elizabeth was scooped by Baby, and Crying Child was crushed by an animatronic, who would only reasonably have the power to crush a skull because they were intentionally given said power. Another theory is that while he had the desire to kill, he only succumbed to his demons when his children died. However, Elizabeth's death directly disproves that theory as well, since she was particularly told not to go near the baby animatronic, and Afton had created a whole business around the Funtime robots, all of which have secret containment chambers to store away items, as he puts it. And I think that was his intention when opening Circus Baby's Pizzeria, only closing after the first day because his daughter was the one caught, rather than someone else's. To find other potential motivation, we need to look at his first kill. That's typically the most significant one and provides us with the most information. Afton's first kill was Charlotte, as we've mentioned before. This could mean plenty of things, especially considering how it's his business partner's daughter, who he kills outside Fredbear's family diner, not wearing his signature Spring Bonnie suit. But while his motivation is still unknown, his crimes are known, at least during his spree from 1983 to his eventual true death in 2027. In 1983 he killed Charlotte, and then in 1985 he killed 5 more. This incident we came to know as the Missing Children's Incident, and victims we now know as Jeremy, Fritz, Susie, Gabriel, and Cassidy. Each body was stuffed into a different animatronic suit, which for some reason weren't investigated when reports came in that they were leaking blood, especially when the bodies were never found, resulting in the inability to convict Afton. After some thorough investigation from my predecessors though, we've learned that Jeremy was inside Bonnie, Fritz was inside Foxy, Gabriel was inside the company mascot Freddy, Susie was inside of Chica, and Cassidy was inside the Golden Freddy animatronic. After killing Charlotte, Afton did all of the killing inside of this Spring Bonnie animatronic, which was a Golden Bonnie animatronic present at the first Fredbear's Family Diner location where his son died, and as well as where he killed Charlotte, which could be a reason why he wears the suit, wanting to bring his original kills with him, or potentially wanting to bring his son with him in a sense. After this original missing children's incident though, Afton went on to kill another 10 currently unnamed victims, but the original 5 were the ones that haunted him the most, causing him to flee into his murder suit for comfort, but his haste coupled with the moisture of his room thanks to failing ceilings resulted in the spring lock mechanisms failing, and the animatronic aspects of the Spring Bonnie animatronic being put back in place with Afton still inside. However, somehow this would not kill him, and would instead fuel a new location called Fazbear's Fright in 2023, as well as a series of animatronics kids can order to their homes thanks to Fazbear's Funtime service, which seemed to release conveniently and in time with the COVID-19 pandemic as a way for kids to get their favorite animatronics on demand at their home. As to why they were shipping versions of their serial killer, we still don't know. This Afton animatronic hybrid aptly named Springtrap was the focus of Fazbear's Fright until it burnt down after only being open for a week. And after this, fires became a seemingly regular occurrence at Fazbear locations, since only a short time later another pizzeria featuring Fazbear characters burnt down after being open for a week as well. However, this time Springtrap was seemingly taken with it, and the still breathing yet unconscious Afton was taken to Heracles Hospital and was admitted to room 1280. Where after being unresponsive in his coma was taken off of life support. However, Afton somehow was still alive, and then went missing. Hospital staff assumed that Father Arthur Blythe was the one who took him, and DNA found at a nearby Fazbear Entertainment warehouse matched DNA on file for William Afton. However, this was a mass of blood, very dark blood, in fact almost black, and a series of footsteps presumably belonging to Father Blythe were found nearby. However, we were unable to locate him and are still searching. We believe that Father Blythe killed Afton, but we are unsure what he could have done to leave the body in such a state. There were also reports of a small shadow boy running around Heracles Hospital around Afton once he began responding. However, the nurse Mia is the only one to report it. Mia described the boy as, quote, a little boy with curly black hair and rosy cheeks. He had an alligator mask on and a devilish grin. When he didn't look like a shadow, that is. However, security cameras showed nothing, and nobody else was able to substantiate these claims. According to police reports that saw the substance in the Fnaf books, it's appeared to be a bubbling liquid mercury. The appearance of this glowing silvery liquid is similar to Remnant depicted in the novel trilogy, particularly in the Fourth Closet, which makes sense given that Remnant, as we know, is a combination of human soul and metal, which is created when a soul possesses a metal-based object like an animatronic endoskeleton. In the Fazbear Frights books, where most of this lore comes from, its powers are expanded upon. Remnant can be used to make already living beings even more powerful through the power of positive memories, kind of like how everyone gets defeated by the power of love in The Flash. The primary scientist studying Remnant is Dr. Talbert, a friend of Phineas Taggart who studied its negative counterpart, Agony, which now means that the agony that possesses animatronics and the human soul are two different things, but seemingly both of which had to come from someone who died. Talbert studied Remnant because his daughter Renelle was sick when she was younger, and he wanted to hold on to the good memories of her in case he lost her. Remnant could also be isolated and put into a certain object, so Talbert created a pendant made from Remnant metal as a gift for Renelle. Keep in mind that this Remnant is also just a form of metal. It's kind of like a metal compound, like Damascus steel, but instead of a lot of layers of steel, it's metal and souls melted down, and then that is liquid Remnant, but then as a solid, I guess you could say
say it's a remnant nugget. It's unclear how Dr. Talbert got his hands on such a large amount of remnant, but he had a steady supply that somehow was consistently delivered to his house. This also got the attention of an evil entity named Eleanor, who was introduced, or I guess created in the story to be beautiful from 1:35 a.m., the second Fazbear Frights book. Her goal was to obtain remnant for herself to become even more powerful so that she could spread pain and suffering across the world using the power of positive vibes. However, what we currently know about remnant and agony tells us that to destroy it properly, we need to burn it. Hence why there have really been so many fires in this series. Fnaf 3, 6, and 9 all end with something or someone getting set on fire. Fnaf 3's fire was all about dealing with Springtrap, and Fnaf 6 was about putting everyone who knew about the atrocities that occurred at Freddy's to rest, and sending William to hell. And then, in Fnaf 9, we burn Trap multiple times to get him to stop possessing Freddy, and to again try to kill him. Because Gregory is not above killing. That's a topic for another day. And this is because Henry learned that the only way to destroy Remnant and put these beings to rest was through fire. But is that really how we deal with these animatronics and people? Because like, while 9 out of 10 doctors recommend Crest Pro Health toothpaste, 3 out of 3 FNAF fires haven't worked. We have been told that fire is the only thing that is hot enough to burn off Remnant and to actually destroy it, aside from the fact that matter cannot be created nor destroyed, but it's also been described as a liquid metal. Liquid metal is a hell of a lot hotter than your typical run-of-the-mill gasoline fire, trust me, okay? I have the expertise in this department, so in essence, every single animatronic who is supposed to be set free by a cleansing fire hasn't been so far. The only time we've seen souls actually be put to rest is in Fnaf 3's Happiest Day minigame, which involved no fire and just putting the souls to rest by giving them what they wanted, a birthday party. But how could that be possible? Like, Dr. Talbert wouldn't lie to us. He's researching so his little girl wouldn't die, right? Well, this is where this theory starts to blow your mind. I don't think that Dr. Talbert, as described in the Fnaf Fazbear Frights books, is a real person. Or rather, I don't think that Dr. Talbert is truly his name. Let's think about it. Who else do we know with a daughter in a compromising position who would have an endless flow of remnant from an undisclosed source and a close personal friend working as his opposite? That's right, ladies and gentlemen, William frickin' Afton. William Afton, my friends, is the true identity of Dr. Talbert. William is no stranger to using aliases either. Remember Dave Miller from the Silver Eyes? Exactly. And this connection only gets stronger the more you look at it. See, Talbert's daughter ends up being impersonated by Eleanor, who in the Fazbear Frights books is, like, described to be Baby. She's described as basically Baby, just with a longer neck. So both daughters in this scenario also end up becoming Baby at some point. Renelle through being impersonated, and Elizabeth when she possessed Baby through, you guessed it, Remnant. And Talbert and Eleanor are attacked by the Stitch Wraith. What does that relate to? Perhaps the son, who is part animatronic that's been working to undo his father's plans? Michael? Have we seen the animatronics in the games? No, so how can we take any of what's being said in the Fazbear Frights epilogues as fact? The baby blob turned out to be real, but everything else could simply be a metaphor. And Renelle might not even be meant to represent Elizabeth. It could be meant to represent Crying Child, making Eleanor Elizabeth and the Stitch Wraith Michael, and honestly, that sounds like a much more plausible solution than what's being described in these books, especially with the revelation that Gregory could, again, be a rebuilt Crying Child robot, because all these experiments with Remnant worked. If this was truly describing William and Crying Child and Michael and Elizabeth, this would make perfect sense with the story. This is like a recap of what's been going on with Fnaf. Fnaf 4, Crying Child dies. So William promises that he will put him back together by finding Remnant after he kills the 5 missing children and then disassembling them in Fnaf 3's minigames when he releases the spirits and then gets trapped in the Springlock suit, but then We also learn in the original novel trilogy that the remnant from the original 5 animatronics was injected into the Funtime animatronics. So while the Funtime animatronics have the souls of the 5 missing children all combined into one, they also are serving as an experiment for how he can use it to bring back his son. And he even injects Eleanor, who was impersonating Renelle, with the remnant, just as he recreates Crying Child into Gregory. So here's how I see it. William as Talbert, through, I'm guessing, just journals that Henry just somehow stumbled onto, were made to spread the rumor of Remnant needing to burn, to be destroyed, so that if Henry ever tried to stop William, he wouldn't be able to. That's why William knows he'll always come back. He's rigged the game, and in doing so, ensured the survival of himself, his daughter, and his 2 sons. Renelle is a representation of Crying Child, having been bitten at his birthday party in 1983 that William is trying to save. Eleanor is the power-hungry daughter Elizabeth that only wants the remnant for herself, even willing to abandon her father to die to live another day, as we see with the Afton amalgamation, or even kill her father, as we potentially see at the end of the true Fnaf security breach ending. And the Stitch Wraith is Michael, at first misunderstood, killing his creator like Michael tried in the Fnaf 3 and 6 Fire, but in reality trying to right the wrongs of his father before him and bring peace to his family. And as we see in Security Breach, they accomplished their goals. Gregory, representing Crying Child, is back. He and Freddy, representing Michael, stopped William, and Vanny, Elizabeth, gets to fight another day.
And at 10, Crying Child. Okay, so I'm putting this one at number 10 because I personally don't think that the Crying Child is a Springlock victim. To me, there's just no logical way that that animatronic jaw should have crushed his skull, because, you know, the Springlocks were already active and that would require a lot of power to crush a skull anyway. However, it is possible that since this is a series about haunted animatronics possessed by spirit metal, that logic kind of gets thrown out the window. So assuming that he is a Springlock victim, that's brutally scary. Being thrown into an animatronic's mouth and crying so much that you make the jaw snap onto your own skull, killing you instantly? Holy crap, that is nightmare fuel. That's why some people are scared of robots or animatronics, and while it may not be realistic, the possibility of it happening is still horrifying to say the least, especially since not even that long ago he lost his sister to Circus Baby, and that's pretty messed up. And I'm sure that Michael, who put the kid in his mouth, as long as, you know, I'm wrong about my theory, he'd be scarred for life. And I think I would be too. Before we move on to number 9, can you do me a favor and smash that like button and subscribe if you haven't yet if you are looking forward to this list. I saw a load of comments asking for it, so this better not flop. If it flops, so help me, you will all have a reckoning. The more likes we get, the more likely we are to do a part 2, and it also helps us against the algorithm almighty and lets us grow the channel, which means more cool vids for you, so you know, it's a win-win, so thank you. And at 9, The Twisted Ones. The Twisted Ones novel starts a year after The Silver Eyes ended, with Charlie in university. One day, however, Clay Burke comes to see Charlie, and for some reason brings her to see a corpse with familiar wounds. This could either be because she would recognize them, or because she was working with the police, or because they had to advance the plot. I don't know, I haven't read the original novels, but I want to. However, looking at the wounds, she confirms that they are in fact a Springlock failure, meaning that we have an unnamed Springlock victim in the Twisted Ones novel. If this character does have a name, like if it's revealed in later down the line or something, please let me know, because I couldn't find one online. However, while this may seem insignificant to you, the real horror of this number comes from what it signifies. This Springlock marks the return of William Afton, since at the same time, Clay also tells her that a blood sample they took from Afton showed that the body was a fake, or at least it was fake blood. The return of a killer, and the purple guy of all of them, that's pretty damn scary if you ask me. And at 8, The New Kid. Continuing with the theme of Fnaf books, what about the story The New Kid from 1:35 AM, the third Fazbear Frights book? The story revolves around Devon, Mick, and Kelsey. Devon and Mick are outcasts. They aren't popular, they aren't cool, but when the new kid Kelsey arrives at their school, they make a new friend, despite Kelsey being charismatic and adored by everyone else in the school. Over time though, Devon grows jealous of Kelsey, since Kelsey has everything that Devon wants. So in an act of revenge or to gain control, because you know, that's kind of serial killery, Devon hatches a plan to lure Kelsey to an abandoned Freddy Fazbear's to trap him in a Springlock suit for a couple hours, to try to humble him, I guess. But the plan goes horribly wrong. After getting in the suit, the spring locks fail, as expected, because you know this is a Fnaf book, causing Kelsey's blood to soak into the fur of the animatronic and pull around the ground. Devon and Mick leave Kelsey for dead so that they won't get in trouble, but something doesn't feel right. So a week later, Devon returns to make sure that Kelsey's body is still there, for some reason. He sticks his hand into the animatronic's mouth to feel if it's there, and snap! The spring locks fail yet again, as per usual, and Devon gets his hand stuck inside the suit and bleeds out, but not before seeing a body in the suit, but with black hair instead of Kelsey's blonde hair. If that's not scary, then you need to go see a doctor, because that's bone chilling. That's messed up. No. And it's 7, Michael Afton. This relies on heavy speculation and assumption. However, if the entered enema is truly what killed Michael's body, then could it be considered a spring locking? We don't really know if the Funtime animatronics have spring locks, but we can assume that they do thanks to their moving parts and abilities like a giant claw that goes out and stores items. But this would also mean that Ennard would have at least some of those same parts. So if the Funtime animatronics that were made around the same time as the original spring lock animatronics used similar parts or techniques, which is likely, that means that Michael Afton would also be a spring lock victim. We don't need solid proof since this is a possible spring locking victims list, so proof of possibility is all I really need. And honestly, I think that this would provide a good explanation as to why he turned purple. Since people who die don't turn purple. Instead, if they rot, they would most likely be depicted as green, especially when another major character is linked to the color purple. So, if that is indeed bruising, it would make sense if the spring lock mechanisms were hurting him from the inside out. And at 6, Grim Chica. The first spring lock victim in the Final Nights series, Grim Chica is a primary antagonist in Final Nights 3 Nightmares Awoken. Unlike others, she is not a Reaper animatronic. Grim Chica holds a strong appearance to the spring lock suit on the poster in the Night 3 cutscene, but her faceplates are very hard to spot and she's almost entirely purple. She really resembles Toy Chica. The glowing accents inside of her resemble a human corpse. She lacks a bib unlike the original Chica, and her overall body is very slim like the original Toy Chica, except for her hips, which appear to be much wider. Got the baby birthing hips. I regret that immediately. And she lacks shoulders or upper arms, with her forearms protruding from her armpits. Grim Chica is also revealed to be a spring lock victim in the museum level, saying, quote, "A victim of a spring lock failure, forever forced to haunt the suit she is wearing, now being manipulated by your sister and mother. Tried spray on tan, still very pale." Why is that so relatable to me? Like, no matter what I do, I'll always be pale and pasty. Not the whole being manipulated by your sister and mother thing. That's weird. But like, I'm okay with forever being pasty. However, I did rank this above Grim Foxy because like, it's Chica. And look what they did to my girl Chica. I'm sorry, Mommy Kentucky, for the transgressions. Halfway through into number 5, Shadow Animatronics. One of the oldest theories is that the Shadow animatronics are the first spring lock victims. This comes to us after the Fnaf 3 phone guy dialogue that mentioned multiple and simultaneous spring lock failures, which some interpreted as multiple spring lock suits failing at once, since the term spring lock in this situation is used to describe the suit as a whole and the individual spring lock mechanisms that hold back all the robotic parts in the suit. So the line of multiple and simultaneous spring lock failures could mean multiple of the spring locks inside the suit failing at the same time, or more than one suit failing at the same time. This led some to theorize that previous employees were killed in the spring lock suits, which is where the Shadow animatronics came from. This is supported by the fact that these shadows are of Freddy and Bonnie, the two animatronics that have spring lock versions. And while there are holes in this theory, there is potential that this is the case. So the Shadow animatronics are possible spring lock victims. I'm gonna have to keep saying that because people in the comments are gonna get mad. It's like, oh, they were spring lock victims. They could have been. It's possible. And that's the list, okay? And at 4, Golden Call. As a human, when alive, Golden Call's name was Kyle. However, he is now a springlock victim stuck inside a Golden Freddy springlock suit. Golden Call has the typical rundown springlock suit vibe, similar to Springtrap. However, this is even more gruesome. His left ear is bent, he has guts coming out of basically every hole in his body, human eyes are hanging out of the animatronic's eye sockets. He's even missing exosuit on his right foot, and the character is holding a flesh-colored, at least it's flesh-colored, it may be even like fully like a flesh, phone in his right hand that stays stuck to his head via more flesh or blood strands connecting to the side of his head. It's horrifying, dude. This is a monstrosity. And looking at his age on the wiki, Kyle was only 5 when he got spring locked, which is absolutely nuts and just flat out horrible. So unfortunate, man. He was supposed to be the next best Fortnite player. That's a joke for the long-term subs. You know it.
Number 3, Funtime Bonnie is a springlock suit. Funtime Bonnie really only appears in Sister Location as an empty head. But what if there is something else going on with this animatronic? After all, there is one animatronic who we also don't get a good look at in the game, but who we are pretty familiar with by the end of it, just based on our experiences. That would be the springlock animatronic that we are stuck in temporarily. While we never see it explicitly, we also never get to see Funtime Bonnie explicitly either. This has led some to theorize that Funtime Bonnie is said springlock suit and is the older animatronic that Circus Baby was referring to. The only thing that seems odd is how new we'd imagine Funtime Bonnie to look, but then again, it's more likely that the animatronics at Sister Location are actually really old and have just been well maintained and possibly refurbished, and possibly, hidden away there. After all, Circus Baby's Pizza World seems to be one of the first locations, I think. This timeline is hard to keep track of, so forgive me if I'm wrong about something that has not actually been confirmed. So I guess we can't really be wrong about much.
Penultimately, in at number 2, Springtrap. I believe we all know this story by now. Everything was going well at first. They couldn't pin him down and he was on his way to immortality. Once William discovered Remnant, however, he spiraled. He wanted to use it to fuel his life and make himself truly immortal. So in an effort to study it further, William lures possessed animatronics to the back room that they can't access and uses it to dismantle them, planning to melt down their endoskeletons to make soul-infused metal. However, by doing this, he unknowingly releases the souls of the victims he claimed oh so long ago. Shocked, he tries to scare them by getting into his Spring Bonnie suit, which also coincidentally makes him feel more powerful. However, this haste coupled with the leaking in the back room causes the spring locks to fail, crushing him in torturous agony for the next 30 years. However, he didn't die from this. As we learn in the Man in Room 1280, he was being kept alive by the spirit of another victim. So he was living that agonizing pain for 30 years, and that makes him damn well deserving of the number 2 spot. And before you ask, no, him and Garvey are 2 separate characters, meaning that they can both be included on this list. You're welcome. Finally, in at number 1, you. A spoiler alert for a fan game, and if I say which fan game, it's going to spoil it. So if you want to avoid spoilers, click away now. And thanks for watching. I'll give you a chance to do that now. Okay, now that you've prepared for spoilers, A Shadow Over Freddy's is a Fnaf fan game created by Fnaf on Game Jolt. It released on April 25th, 2018, and since it was made by the same guy who is currently working on Fnaf Plus for the Fazbear fanverse, you know it's bound to be good. The gameplay of A Shadow Over Freddy's is a hybrid between a traditional point-and-click game and a free-roaming horror game. The player wakes up to find themselves with no memories in a black and white abandoned Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, and is tasked with surviving 5 nights in escaping the restaurant. The player is given a different task each night and must complete said task before 6 AM and without being attacked by any roaming animatronics. However, the ending of the game has you getting trapped in a springlock suit and left to rot, meaning that you are a springlock victim, which is probably the scariest victim of them all, cause I don't know about you, but I'd rather not get springlocked. Although I know there are plenty of you that would just love that. You'd fill the suit with liquids that aren't blood, and that's messed up. Like, I'm not one for kink shaming, but yeah, there's kinks, and then there's like being killed, you know? I don't know how else to put that. And at 10, William Afton. Again, could William have suffered a springlock failure before getting trapped in the Spring Bonnie suit like we see in FNAF 3? It's possible, and it certainly appears like that's the case in the FNAF novels, since William is described to have scars that are consistent with the springlock failure before becoming Springtrap in the novels. So could it have happened in the games? Could William have been the reason the springlock suits were retired? Since we hear of an unfortunate incident at the sister location, so is that unfortunate unfortunate incident William. There are plenty of people it could be, but William having to deal with it would certainly get them put out of commission for a time. But with William continuing to use the suit and putting it on when the room was wet like we see in Fnaf 3's cutscene, it suggests that that's probably unlikely, but it's still possible. So since this list is possible Springlock victims, I think he deserves to be on this list, at least at number 10, since can we really talk about Springlock victims without mentioning good old Willie Afton? Exactly. And at 9, Henry Emily. Now this is certainly an interesting case, because seemingly Henry has died multiple ways across FNAF canons, with his first apparent death being in FNAF World at the hands of Baby. His death in the novels seems to have happened before Silver Eyes starts, and then he dies in FNAF 6 along with everything else. But could one of these deaths involve the Springlock failure, or something having to do with Springlocks? I mean, maybe Afton offed Henry in one of these realities, or maybe Baby has some Springlock mechanisms inside her when she killed Henry. Hell, maybe Henry just climbed into the wrong suit at the wrong time. It's a question that we don't really pay attention to because, well, Henry's death doesn't mean much to the story, unfortunately, but it's still true. Henry dying doesn't really mean much to the overall FNAF lore, and we didn't even know he was alive until FNAF 6, so maybe for irony's sake Scott had him bite the dust in a quicker way, rather than just, you know, burning alive, because that sucks. Maybe he wanted to prevent himself from even more severe agony so that he didn't possess something. And at 8, Phone Guy. Phone Guy's death is one of the most mysterious deaths of all. We hear him die in FNAF 1 on night 4 with the sound of multiple animatronics banging on his doors, but we never really get an explanation as to what happens to him. We know he dies, but other than that it's all speculation. One of the theories though is that animatronics got him and shoved him into a suit, resulting in a very painful death, especially since at this point the Springlock suits were either still in operation or hadn't been totally removed. The actual timeline of the events of the Springlock suits is a little messy since we don't really have years for things like them getting scrapped, yet it's still possible that Phone Guy was shoved into one or maybe used it to hide. After all, maybe Phone Guy is secretly William Afton and Scott just didn't want us to know that yet or something. I still feel like that might have been in the realm of possibility. Maybe not now, but it was.
Number 7. Kelsey is Crying Child / Cassidy. While Kelsey being Andrew could make some sense, others have speculated that the corpse found inside the suit actually belongs to Cece, Crying Child. This is obviously because of the physical description of the corpse, which has curly black hair. A lot of people coming back to that curly black hair for a lot of these theories. This description matches the appearance of Crying Child, who also appears to have black and curly or wavy hair based on what we see in the games. But Kelsey is blonde. How does he fit in? Well, it is possible that Kelsey is the amalgamated manifestation of both Crying Child and Cassidy, who perhaps both haunt Golden Freddy if in this continuity they were both victims and have decided to share possession of the animatronic. Neither of them of course was blonde, but they could be changing their appearance together, using a disguise to go out in the world and trick bullies into trusting them. Cassidy could also possibly be considered the more aggressive personality, while Crying Child could be considered the nicer side, and also might bring the masculine appearance to the table when it comes to their disguise. Because obviously Cassidy was a girl, so yeah.
And at 6, Bite of 87. The Bite of 87 is such an infamous incident that I can already hear people groaning in the comments. However, what if the victim of the Bite of 87, whoever that actually was a victim of a Springlock failure? It could make sense, since the animatronics had no harmful tendencies before this, so a Springlock failure is a reasonable assumption as to why someone got a frontal lobe removed. And a Springlock failure, assumingly, would definitely provide enough power to do that, since the Springlocks themselves would snap with such ferocity, and would probably circumvent the whole needing more power to do that thing. And if it was Jeremy, it would explain why the animatronics were suspended, because now one of their employees was bit and they had to promote him and fork over some extra cash to make sure that he didn't sue. So overall, whoever the Bite of 87 victim is could definitely have been a Springlock victim.
Number 5. Yellow Suit. In FNAF 2 on night 6, Phone Guy's call reveals that he is surprised you came into work at the location, as it is meant to be shut down for a while. He tells you that there was an incident that happened involving the yellow suit in the back, which many have theorized to be the Springlock suit used in the missing children incident, where 5 victims went missing. Some even think that this phone call is referring to that incident. Phone Guy claims that someone wore the yellow suit, and ever since the animatronics have been acting strangely. Is it because they had victims stuffed into them, and possibly because those victims' souls are making the animatronics behave more aggressively because they're possessing them? I don't know, but it makes sense.
And at 4, Cassidy. Cassidy is the most mysterious victim in the missing children's incident. Her name was hidden for years, only really being discovered recently, and honestly we don't know too much about her. We don't know how she died, so the potential is there for her to be a Springlock victim. Maybe William knew that it would be easier that way. After all, she does possess Golden Freddy, who we figure it was a Springlock suit that ended up having the guts removed, hence the slumped overness. However, if this was the case and Cassidy's body was in that suit, they would have found it when they were gutting him. But maybe William was the one who gutted it, considering how he was the suit technician. And I mean, like, to be fair, for a suit technician, he did miss a fatal flaw with the animatronics that he literally designed, since, you know, he got snapped when the suit was wet. Either way, Cassidy being a Springlock victim would help explain a lot in the series. Just, you know, the hallucinations and whatnot. And at 3, Am I Real? Am I Real, also known as Cake Bear, is presumably the primary and most recurrent antagonist in Dormitibus. Am I Real has 2 different forms. His first form is Cake Bear. Cake Bear's design originated from the Save Him minigame, where he delivered cake to children while a kid is murdered outside. He is the predecessor of both Fredbear and Freddy Fazbear. Cake Bear is a brown bear animatronic that also acts like a Springlock suit that appears in most of the main nights. Although they do look similar, the only similarities he has to Freddy Fazbear in reality is that they both possess a top hat, are brown, have blue eyes, and are a bear. Am I Real's second form is a form that resembles Springtrap, however. This form has a green color much like Springtrap and contains human remains. His right eye socket has gotten bigger on the side and a big hole can be seen on the right side of his head. His top hat has received some withering on it as well, and his lower jaw is slanted and worn down, no longer circular like Cake Bear's. He also has a sizable hole in the right side of his torso, revealing organs. Ha, lovely. Rips and tears cover his arms, revealing more human remains. He also appears to be missing at least 1 finger on his right hand, and it's absolutely terrifying to look at. Of course, 3 out of 10 of these are going to be from Dormitibus. Like, what did you think was gonna happen? Did you watch the Dormitibus animatronics list? And ultimately, in at number 2, Missing Children. Much like the Cassidy situation, the entirety of the missing children involved in the missing children's incident may have been Springlock victims. We're still unsure as to the method of extermination that William used on the screaming pests. Sorry, the kids who run around in my building hallways they're still getting to me. If they ever go missing though, these videos are not going to help me. Anyway, we don't know how William dispatched of these kids before shoving them into the suits, and honestly there may not be a way that he killed them before shoving them in. The act of putting them in the suits may very well have been what killed them, which would make sense given that a Springlock incident would be more agonizing than a simple knife to the chest. And a Springlock collapse would be a more realistic way for the suits to start leaking blood and other fluids, since 1 knife wound wouldn't really do that, especially around their eyes. Even if the suits didn't like snap closed, if William shoved them into the suits, that's close enough for me. Finally, and at number 1, Crying Child. Okay, now this one is going to be controversial, but there is no way that I could do this list without mentioning one of the greatest debates in my DMs ever. The amount of people who message me on Instagram not asking about my game's Kickstarter, but rather the Bite of 83 and how it had to have been a Springlocking bothers me to my core. I say this every time I bring it up. I don't think that this was a Springlock failure. That being said, it's still possible, and that's what this list is about. The reason I don't think it was a Springlock failure is because the Fredbear suit was already in animatronic mode, meaning no Springlocks would have a chance of failing. Since, keep in mind, a Springlock failure refers to the Springlock mechanism failing to stay open, meaning it snaps back into animatronic mode. That's why it's bad if someone is inside, and there would be no Springlock mechanism in and around the mouth because it would always be in animatronic mode, since the jaw just moves up and down. But nevertheless, it's still a possibility, since logic and physics doesn't seem to apply to the FNAF world, which is made evident by those goddamn doors from FNAF 1. Even if they're electromagnet, they would still be open with power, so if they ran out of power, they would end up closing. Just saying.
Number 10. Springlock doors. Something that has come up multiple times over the course of all of these games, a question that still has yet to be answered, is how do the doors open if the power turns off, considering that they're mechanical doors? Well, what if the doors are actually spring-loaded and it's the power that holds them in place, and then when they turn off, they just snap upwards, I guess. The other strange thing in general about the doors is that they slide upwards, not sideways. That just means those straight looking sheets of metal are actually able to curl up somehow, being stored in the ceiling, like a garage door, although I don't think that's what's happening, or that there is a wall directly above for that door to slide into, which would be a lot of convenient wall stacking, especially if this is a one-level building. Then it really doesn't make sense. Either way, I can only imagine that these doors would even be capable of springing open if it was the power alone keeping them shut, and that they are somehow spring-loaded to always be open, unless the power is on to push them down. That's the only way we can rationalize the way they work. Maybe this is also why our power runs out so fast as well. After all, I'm assuming it would take quite a bit of force and therefore power to keep them in place if they were spring-loaded. Number 9. Kelsey is Andrew. Kelsey is the new kid in one of the stories from Fazbear Frights, number 3, 1:35 a.m. Coincidentally, I think one of my favorite books in the Fazbear Frights series. The story itself is also titled appropriately The New Kid. It centers around Kelsey, who is a new kid at school that everyone likes because he is so friendly and good looking. In the end, Kelsey ends up being betrayed by his new friends that he's made, who try to scare him by taking him to an abandoned Freddy's location and making him dance around in a spring-lock golden Freddy suit, which of course malfunctions, killing him. Later on, one of the friends comes back for Kelsey only to get stuck in the suit himself and see a corpse inside that doesn't seem to match Kelsey's appearance. This corpse is noted as having black curly hair, which led many fans of the books to speculate that Kelsey is in fact the vengeful spirit Andrew, who also appears in another story later on in the book series, The Man in Room 1280 from the 5th Fazbear Frights book. In that story, the vengeful spirit, whom many believe to be Andrew, one of the spirits that possesses the Stitch Wraith, appears as a dark boy with curly hair wearing an alligator mask. With a description of his hair matching that of the corpse found inside the spring-lock golden Freddy suit, it's easy to see why people think Kelsey is Andrew. And friends, before we move on to our next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more lists about all of the spring locks, so many spring lock things, so springy, so locky, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Plush Trap is from Sister Location, and what's more, might also be an older model spring lock suit? Based on what Circus Baby says about the spring lock suit we are stuck in coming from her old location, we could theorize that Plush Trap is also a Sister Location spring lock suit, especially since Plush Trap looks much older by comparison. But why do we think Plush Trap is also a spring lock suit? Well, it's interesting that in the book Fetch, we learn more about the Plush Trap animatronic, where it is implied that it can mimic the voices of other folks, something that prior to Fetch's release, only Sister Location animatronics seemed to be capable of. This is what makes us think that Plush Trap comes from Sister Location and perhaps was an older animatronic brought over from Circus Baby's previous location. While Plush Trap doesn't really fit in with the overall aesthetic of Circus Baby's entertainment and rental, we do know that an older spring lock suit was also kept there. Does that mean that Plush Trap is also an old spring lock that initially was its sister location, just based on the voice mimicking? If so, how did they get to be with the Nightmare animatronics? And also, who wore the Plush Trap suits if they were ever worn, if they were spring locks in that way? Was it designed for a shorter employee or possibly for kids to wear? Also, just to be clear, I'm not implying that that is the spring lock suit that we are in Sister Location when you're playing the game, because yeah, I don't know how tall Michael Afton is, but I don't think he's as small as Plush Trap.
And at 7, Grim Fredbear. Grim Fredbear is one of the antagonists from Final Night's 3 Nightmares Awoken. He's only active on Night 5 and found in the left hallway. Grim Fredbear resembles the normal golden Fredbear suit, only with his suit glowing a deep purple while the interior of the suit glows a bright white. His upper face appears to be torn off, including his eyes, leaving an empty, hollow, gaping hole in its place. The inside of the mask, though it appears like there's nothing really inside, actually conceals a white, pale human head that can only be seen during his jump scare. And before you ask, yes, it's mine. The animatronic is clearly meant to be a reference to Shadow Freddy and the theory that the Shadow animatronics were Springlock victims, which was later confirmed by Scott to be false when stating that William was the only victim of a Springlock failure. And in the museum level, which unlocks after Night 5, it is revealed that Grim Fredbear is a Springlock victim, saying, quote, another Springlock failure victim, the second generation of Fredbear.
Number 6. Shadow Freddy and RWQFSFASXC. I think I said that all right. This theory, I believe, has been debunked, so just a word to the wise about that, but I still thought it was a pretty cool theory that existed, and I personally like the sound of it. I think it's a neat theory, hence why I'm gonna share it here with you, even though it's been discredited. But just know, we know that. The theory posits that Shadow Freddy and Shadow Bonnie were both victims of a spring lock failure. Phone Guy talks about the sister location experiencing multiple and simultaneous spring lock failures, leading some fans to think that might explain the shadow animatronics we see and what exactly they are. Spirits who are attached to the suits that they died in, but were for some reason unable to fully possess them, instead becoming a shadow-like version of that animatronic. I just think it's a cool idea. I mean, shadow animatronics are so mysterious to me, so when I find cool stories that could explain how they work, their theories, I love them.
Halfway through into number 5, Garvey. A psychopathic, cold-blooded killer. He stopped being human long ago. That's how Garvey is described in the extras of Dormitibus, the game from which he hails. Garvey is the penultimate antagonist of Dormitibus, and as a human, he was the man who murdered the missing children. He later went on to get trapped in Spring Bonnie, becoming Springtrap, and then was burnt to a permanent death in the Fazbear Fright's fire. Garvey is a more gory version of Springtrap from Fnaf 3. However, he is not William Afton, as the game was released before the name reveal, even before Fnaf 4. Springtrap, but with hardly any exosuit or animatronic casing, whatever you want to call it. He crawls on all fours and uses his left hand as a foot and his left foot as a hand, like some demonic monkey from hell that Satan didn't sanction the creation of. Just look at this thing and tell me that it shouldn't be on this list. If you do, you'll be lying.
Number 4, Bite of 83. We know that Fredbear was the one behind the Bite of 83 based on the minigames we see in Fnaf 4, and we also know that CC was the victim of said bite and eventually died of his injuries. But what we don't know is why the bite happened. However, if you look deep into the lore surrounding spring locks, it feels like a no-brainer here. Sorry, no pun intended, crying child. Sorry about that. We already know that spring lock failures have pretty much been an ongoing problem since the creation of the suits, and we also know that spring lock failures on a massive scale eventually got these kinds of suits retired. So what if the Bite of 83 was the major beginning of that? What if the bite happened because of a spring lock failure itself? All the clues seem to be pointing us in this direction. A technical issue is the only real explanation, as the animatronics themselves seem to have not been inherently malicious, not until they were bonded with spirits which lingered inside them, making them vengeful. And so if there wasn't a spirit in there, then we must assume there was a technical error, a spring lock malfunction.
Getting close to the end into number 3, Kelsey. Kelsey is in essence the main antagonist of the Fazbear Fright story, the new kid from the third Fazbear Frights book 135 AM. Kelsey had just moved to town and ends up making friends with the protagonist Devin. Devin ends up getting jealous of how much everyone loves Kelsey, so he hatches a plan with his friend to trap him in a spring lock suit for a few hours. However, when they unleash their plan, the spring lock suit fails and kills Kelsey. At least, so they thought. Since a week later, Devin returns to make sure Kelsey is still there, for some reason, only to find a different body in the suit. He knows that it's someone else because the hair color's different, and then Devin gets stuck and bleeds out, only for the story to cut back to Kelsey meeting 2 more kids at his new school. This is an interesting story because while Kelsey did get spring locked, he ended up being fine. So what happened? Some think that Kelsey is a ghost, while some think that he's the one you should not have killed. But no matter what, we all feel like there is a high possibility that Kelsey was a spring lock victim, at least when they were alive. We don't know how and we don't know when, but it's a definite possibility.
Number 2, spring lock suits were designed to malfunction. You have to wonder, when you learn how easy it is for a suit to malfunction, if the suits themselves were ever actually made with the intention of functioning in a safe manner. It seems more likely that they were made with the intention to do harm. The spring locks can malfunction if not wound up securely and properly before the wearer dons the suit. Not winding up the springs properly can result in them simply going back to their original position, impaling the wearer. The thing that I find very suspicious is how a small amount of moisture, such as that which comes from heavy breathing or even just moisture in the air, can cause the spring locks to completely loosen. These are also suits that you'd think were intended for you to move around in, acting as the character you were dressed up as. And yet in Sister Location, we are warned not to move too much, as this can actually set off the spring locks, implying either the locks were not at all secure when the suit was put on us, or that they are so temperamental that basic movements could set them off, never mind jumping around, dancing, or in general performing as the character that you happen to be dressed as, which is what I'd assume would be expected normally of an employee donning a mascot suit. Number 1. Henry sabotaged the Springlock suits. We don't really have a lot of clearly defined lore from the games that lets us know who really made all of the animatronics between William and his business partner Henry. In some continuities, it's implied that William is more the inventive one, whereas in others, William is more business savvy and Henry is more robotic savvy. It could be possible that the two were actually a little bit of both. I think that makes the most sense just based on everything we've learned about them. If this is the case, who's to say that Henry wasn't the one behind the Springlocks, and perhaps after losing his daughter, sabotaged said Springlock suits while in a vengeful state. When William, however, did not die from Springlocks impaling him, Henry had to resort to other means later down the road, like what we see in Pizzeria Simulator, with him rounding up all of the former animatronics and then burning the place to the ground. Or potentially with Henry being behind the burning down of Fazbear Fright, which also was a suspicious thing that happened, and we don't really know who's behind it, but I feel like Henry could make sense there.